Medical school, interview, primacy effect. The minute you walk through the room, whether it's virtual or not, make sure you're smiling, make sure you say hello. If it's a one-on-one interaction, make sure you introduce yourself, shake their hands. If you can find their name, ask about their name. If they don't introduce themselves, remember their name. Say, well, it's really nice meeting you, Mr. Dr. whatever Johnson. And that's, I'll tell you where you're going to use that name that 99.9999% of applicants will not do. That by itself alone is going to put you in a different profile. In case you've never seen any of our past events, my name is Beruz Momeni. I'm the CEO and founder here at BeMo. I'd like to introduce Ranza, who is our Associate Director of Consulting and one of our lead admission experts. I'd like to introduce you to Meng, who is our Manager of Consulting Department. 3 psychological hacks that you could use to your advantage. You've probably heard people judge a book by its cover. Sad, we don't want you to do that. We've taught you to be ethical and ask questions. Don't do that, but other people will do that, including your trained interviewers. So if you show up, with like really dirty clothing, that's not gonna go very well. First of all, again, that doesn't seem professional. Or like, you haven't combed your hair, or like, you're not clean shaven, or just like, and it doesn't mean you have to be clean shaven. Like if you have a beard, you could have like, for example, if you're a male, it could be like well kept, or it could be not. Those are the things people judge you. Again, we don't say that's the right thing for them to do. They do. So go in with the right outfit, whether you're male or female. Don't have overpowering perfume or cologne. Actually, you probably don't want to use it at all. Deodorant is important, but cologne and perfume maybe not so, because some people could be allergic. You don't want that.
Hygiene. We're still encouraging proper hygiene, just not overwhelming, distracting.
Exactly. So those are 2 different things.
Yeah.
So remember, appearance is important. Whether it's important in the general context of things or not, that's a whole different story. For your interview, it is. Primacy effect, recency effect means that people will remember the first and last things more than anything else that happens in the middle of an interaction or a body of knowledge. So you want to have a really good first impression, really good last impression. At the end of it, don't forget to shake hands, smile, and say, it was a pleasure meeting you, Dr. Johnson. You see, you use that name. People love to hear their own names. That's just how humans are. And the fact that you remember their name is just huge, because most applicants will not. Why? Because they're stressed. They're in their head. They're mostly worried about, like, what am I going to say? Like, it makes sense, but now that you've been at this, you've learned this, use this to your advantage is really important. And don't do the other way, which is forgetting to say bye, forgetting the person's name. In fact, like, I've seen people just turn around and like they're like running, like they're somewhere running out the door. Or like if you're doing a Skype, just turning it off without like, or like a Zoom, you just turn it off, like nobody, no nothing. It's weird as heck. Don't do that kind of stuff. Again, think of the professional and the intro and the conclusion. Now let's go to some strategies, perhaps.
Yeah, so I'll cover this. You're just being evaluated now for your verbal communication. Of course, you want to identify the question type. You want to identify the themes that are present in the question. Is it conflict resolution? Is it an ethical dilemma? Is it looking at professional boundaries? What is the situation here? You'll also want to, again, figure out what information is missing or vague in the question that you're answering, and make sure you make a point to gather that information and figure that out, so that you are not making any judgmental decisions down the line. You also want to identify who all is being impacted, either directly or indirectly. Remember that a lot of these questions are about people. In fact, most of them are about people. If you have people on the top of your mind who could be negatively impacted, who's vulnerable, that's going to help you to navigate these situations in a professional, ethical, and moral way. So once you've done that, then you can identify what actually is the pressing issue here. What am I most concerned about? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? when I answer this question. And then once you know that, you can go ahead and talk about, think about what your decision might be, how your decisions might impact those people that you identified who are directly or indirectly involved, and what are your options? Do your decisions, are they rational, and do they cause the least amount of harm to everyone who is involved? Okay,
Perfect.
so I think we'll look at a sample situational question, which is the perfect place where you should use that type of structure and strategy. Bruce, did you want to say something or
no, go ahead. I think it's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, so a situational question like the one I'm about to read is found in any type of interview, virtual, in person, but it's very common in MMIs, which Ronza had outlined earlier. So here's the question. You're working on a big final project and your best friend who is in your group calls you and lets you know she cannot complete her portion because of family issues. She asks if you can step in and help. You recall that your friend used to slack off in high school. The other group members have told you that they are tired of your friend's constant excuses and threaten to go straight to the professor to ask for both of you, to ask for both you and your friend to be taken off the group. What would you do, or what will you do in this situation? Ronza, should I go through a sample answer, or did you want to jump in with any
Yeah, I can
ideas?
jump in after you if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let me give you kind of outline of the answer that I would give. First of all, though, I would want to figure out what the pressing issue is, and here I really think that the question is highlighting I should be concerned for my friend's well-being, also the academic success of the whole group, and as well fairness to all group members. So here's a possible answer. First, I wouldn't make any assumptions based on my friend's habits in high school. I would instead try to get in touch with her to see what's going on, ask if she's done any part of her work so that she can send it to us, and just in general, evaluate how important it is to include her part in the project to see how we can move forward. If she is dealing with a real and serious family issue, I would let her know that I understand her situation and that I'm there for her if she needs my help. But I would also ask her to communicate her situation to our professor to see if she could do something else or make up for the project, as we may not be able to include her as a contributor if she hasn't actually completed her part. If I find out that she is making up an excuse to get out of working on the project, I would let her know that that's not okay, and that it could have an impact on the rest of the team. But I would give her a chance to complete her part of the project after having this discussion with her. In the worst case situation, if she doesn't do her part even after we have this conversation, then I would let her and my group know that I would have to let the professor know about the situation. And then potentially I would also put in extra work if necessary to ensure that the project is completed and so that my group is not impacted. So that's how I would kind of start navigating the situation. And Ronza, if you have anything to add to my answer or suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, so as we followed along before, this just goes through the structure, right? She was able to have a conversation, gather the information, consider multiple different sides, and come up with some sort of probable solution. I was going to go through a weak response, but I don't know if that makes sense now after we've just tackled a stronger response. But similar to what Bruce had mentioned earlier, if you heard something like, well, you might be taken off a group and you're going to be emotionally charged by it, just making sure that seeing something like that, or even if it's an acting station, that you dial that back and really just consider the pressing issue here, which was the well-being of your friend. There was detail in there thrown in that could persuade you, like, oh, she used to slack off in high school. And some people might take that and say, oh, okay, run with it. She slacked off in high school, likelihood it's happening again. I'm going to tell my teammates that it's actually my friend slacking off, it's not me. So therefore she should get kicked off. So we definitely don't want to run off, but not also dismiss such detail, right? Yes, she used to slack off in high school, but or at least acknowledging she used to slack off in high school. I'm not quite clear what that means. Potentially she was going through issues back then as well. In addition, I'm not quite sure what family issues could mean. It could really be detrimental to her mental health. So again, I'm approaching it in a sensible way, in the way that I'm considering my friend and her well-being. I can acknowledge information given to me that's supposed to persuade me, but I'm going to first even use that information to gather information, in a sense, if that makes sense. I'm going to still be objective to that information, but I could still use that information later on and say, if, however, it seems that my friend is demonstrating the same behaviors that I've explored before in high school, in which she did not contribute to a project, and doing that again. So now in that if and then case, I'm still using that information in two different ways.
Perfect.
I'm also going to go over now some common personal interview questions. We just went over a big one scenario, which tend to be really challenging. But obviously you're going to get questions that ask you about you during an interview. So here are some really common ones. Tell us about yourself, or tell me about yourself. Why are you pursuing medicine? Why are you pursuing our program specifically? And then just a random one here, tell us about a challenge you faced. What did you do? There are lots of questions that are about potentially negative experiences that you've had. And for these types of questions, the way you want to approach these is to talk about a relevant experience. We've been saying show, don't tell. Definitely you'll want to apply that here as well for your interview question answers. And then after you're talking about a relevant experience, you want to highlight what you learned from that experience. It's all about the takeaways. It's all about the growth that you got through that experience. And then if it's appropriate, you can also discuss how that learning outcome applies to your future, your education, your future career, what you're going to do, how you're going to act as a physician and a professional in the future. So I don't know if Ramza, did you want to go over some examples here?
Not necessarily examples, because I think students need to understand sort of like how we framework this. So for example, tell us about yourself, how I would approach this. And again, I don't want to rehearse the answer, and I don't have a rehearsed answer for this, but I'll break down and I'll make up some of the information so we have something to work with here. But I'll break down how to approach this. Maybe I'm going to want to discuss up to 3 things that are valuable, about myself, that I want to demonstrate some skills about my candidacy, who I am as a person. So perhaps immigration is a very big component for me. So I'm going to talk about my immigration, how that taught me a lot about cultural competence and just awareness of different cultures and appreciation of different cultures. Maybe secondly, I want to talk about my involvement with nonprofit organizations, and specifically, if I was involved in one that I really admired, I'd go into the details of why that advocacy was something that was personable to me. Maybe it related to my upbringing. And then lastly, again, it depends on what else you want to discuss about yourself, or what it is that you want to demonstrate. Maybe I was heavily involved in athletics, and that taught me a lot about just collaboration, perseverance, and just patience, practices, and going into the detail of really working to refine my skill as an athlete. So you can kind of take those different components and put that into a response and shorten it, right? You don't want it to be long and going off tangent, sort of an answer. And just present that to the interviewer. So that's an example for tell me about yourself, but that same logic could be applied to why medicine, why the program. You want to dissect what it is that you enjoy about medicine. Something we tell students is you could do this in many different ways, in chronological order of from the time of when you first identified and you were curious about the profession, to when you confirmed it, to when you reaffirmed it. And those could be simple as, I was obsessed with sciences all my life. Watching Bill Nye the Science Guy was pretty cool and fun, to going right into maybe a shadowing experience that sort of solidified that information. And then later on, maybe a specific patient interaction that you had that was really impactful in your journey. Again, that could vary for everybody. And I don't want you to rehearse an answer, but I actually want you to note it down as sort of talking points. So you have guided points when you're saying these things, and it's not sort of like a cookie cutter robotic answer. It's okay if you trip over a word or two. And in addition to specifically why our program, do your research. What do you like about the program? Do you like the curriculum? Do you like where it's located, that it's diverse, the campus is diverse, the diversity initiatives is something that is important to you? Do you like the research component? And then when you break that down, again, it's you admire those attributes and how it relates to you. Like, why are they important to you is sort of the structure to lay out.